A single penny. Could it really be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Or even more? It sounds impossible. After all, most of us barely glance at pennies anymore. They pile up in jars, get lost in couch cushions, or sit forgotten in old drawers. But what if one of those overlooked coins, the kind you'd normally ignore, held a secret that could change everything? Today, we're diving into one of the most mysterious and talked about coins among collectors and treasure hunters alike, the 1990 D Canada 1 cent. A coin so ordinary on the surface, yet surrounded by whispers of rare errors, hidden varieties, and shocking sales that have stunned even seasoned experts. And here's the unsettling part. Some of these coins may still be out there, hiding in plain sight. Let's start with what we think we know. The 1990 Canadian penny, minted in Winnipeg with the D mint mark, was produced in massive quantities. Millions entered circulation. It was never meant to be rare, never meant to be valuable, just another coin in the system. But history has a way of playing tricks, because somewhere along the production line something went wrong. And in the world of coin collecting, wrong can mean incredibly right. Over the years, collectors began noticing subtle differences in certain 1990 D pennies. Tiny details, slight misalignments, features so small most people would never notice them unless they were looking under magnification. But those who did look closer saw something unusual. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. One of the most talked about anomalies involves die errors, imperfections created during the minting process. These errors can leave behind doubling in the lettering, faint ghost images, or unusual spacing that shouldn't exist. Imagine this. You're holding a penny, but the date looks slightly off. The edges of the numbers seem to echo, almost like a shadow. It's subtle, easy to miss, but to a trained eye, it's a red flag, or rather, a golden opportunity. Because coins like that don't just attract attention, they attract serious money. And here's where things take a dramatic turn. There have been reports, and in some cases confirmed private sales of high-grade 1990 D Canadian pennies fetching staggering amounts. Not a few $100s. Not even a few thousand. We're talking numbers that make people stop and question everything they thought they knew about pocket change. One particular specimen, in near-perfect condition, reportedly reached a jaw-dropping $844,000 in the collector's market. Let that sink in. $844,000 for a penny. How is that even possible? Condition is everything. In the coin world, a difference of a single grade can mean thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. A coin that has never been circulated, never scratched, never dulled, one that retains its original mint luster, becomes exponentially more desirable. But condition alone doesn't explain a price like that. It's the combination: rarity, error, demand, timing, and perhaps most powerful of all, the story behind the coin. Because collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying mystery. They're buying the thrill of owning something few others even know exists. Now here's the twist most people never see coming. Not all valuable 1990 D pennies look dramatic. Some of the rarest examples appear completely normal at first glance. No obvious damage, no glaring mistake, just a quiet, unassuming coin, carrying a hidden flaw that only reveals itself under scrutiny. So the question becomes, how many have been overlooked? How many slipped through hands, passed through registers, dropped into jars, never recognized for what they truly were? And more importantly, could one of them be sitting in your home right now? Think about it. If even a handful of these coins escaped into circulation, they didn't come with labels. No warning signs, no flashing lights. They blended in. They became invisible, until someone, somewhere, took a closer look. And that's the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth life-changing money. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Some collectors believe there are still undiscovered variations of the 1990 D penny. Subtle differences in die alignment, micro details in the Queen's portrait, or variations in the maple leaf design that haven't been fully documented. In other words, the full story might not even be known yet. That uncertainty fuels the hunt, because every unopened coin roll, every forgotten collection, every dusty container of change becomes a potential treasure chest. And let's be honest, that's the dream, isn't it? Finding something extraordinary where no one else thought to look, turning something ordinary into something unforgettable. But before you rush to check your coins, there's one more layer to understand. Not every 1990 penny is valuable. In fact, most aren't. And this is where many people get it wrong. They hear about a massive sale and assume every coin with that date must be worth a fortune. But the truth is far more precise and far more fascinating. The value lies in the details. Tiny, almost invisible characteristics that separate the rare from the common. That means, if you're serious about finding one, you need to look closer than ever before. Examine the date. Study the lettering. Look for doubling, misalignment, or anything that feels just slightly off. Use magnification. Compare your coin to verified examples. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary might be measured in fractions of a millimeter. And yet, that tiny difference could mean everything. Now imagine this: you're going through an old jar of coins. Nothing special, just years of accumulated change. Then you spot it: a 1990 Canadian penny. You almost toss it aside, but something makes you pause. You look closer, and suddenly, your heart starts to race. Could this be one of them? That moment, that realization, is what drives collectors around the world. That it's not just about money, that it's about discovery, it's about beating the odds, that it's about finding something rare in a world that feels increasingly picked over. And sometimes, just sometimes, it actually happens. So, where does that leave you? Right here, right now, with a choice: ignore the possibility or investigate it. Because the truth is, opportunities like this don't announce themselves, they hide. They wait. They blend into the background until someone curious enough decides to look deeper. And maybe, just maybe, that someone is you. So the next time you see a penny, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's worthless. Pick it up, turn it over, study it. Because hidden within something so small could be a story worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. And if even one of those rare 1990 Canadian pennies is still out there, unnoticed, unclaimed, then the real question isn't whether they exist. The real question is, who's going to find the next one? It's sitting in a jar, buried in a drawer, maybe even rattling around in your car's cup holder right now. A single, forgotten penny. But what if that coin, the one you'd never bend down to pick up, could be worth not just a few dollars, not even a few thousand, but a life-changing sum? What if I told you that a 1985 Canadian 1-cent coin, a piece of everyday pocket change, has been whispered about in collector circles for reaching staggering values, with reports of pristine examples pushing into the hundreds of thousands, even as high as $844,000 under extraordinary conditions? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? That's exactly what makes it dangerous to ignore, because hidden within the ordinary is where the extraordinary hides best. And today we're uncovering the secrets of the 1985 Canadian penny. Its hidden errors, its rare variations, and the quiet clues that could turn a single coin into a financial breakthrough. Let's begin. At first glance, the 1985 Canadian 1-cent coin is nothing special. It's bronze. It's small. It carries the familiar image of Queen Elizabeth II on one side and the iconic maple leaf twig on the other. Millions were minted. It passed through hands unnoticed for decades. And that's exactly the point. Because rarity doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it disguises itself as common. Now here's where things start to shift. Not all 1985 pennies are created equal. Some were struck under slightly different conditions. Some carry subtle variations that most people, even collectors, overlook at first glance. And a very small number contain minting anomalies that transform them from everyday currency into coveted treasures. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not glanced, not tossed aside, but truly examined it. Because the difference between a 1-cent coin and a 6-figure asset often comes down to details so small they're invisible to the untrained eye. Here's where the story deepens. Point: one of the most talked about features in 1985 Canadian pennies is the variation in the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Known as the young head design, it was standard for the time, but slight differences in strike quality, alignment, and die were created subtle distinctions. Most people miss them. Collectors don't. And then there are errors. Mint errors are where the ordinary rules break, and value explodes. We're talking about off-center strikes, where the design is visibly shifted. Double dies, where letters or numbers appear slightly duplicated, like a ghost image. planchet errors, where the metal blank itself was flawed before it was even struck. Each of these errors tells a story at a moment in time when the minting process slipped just enough to create something unique. And in the world of coin collecting, unique means valuable. But here's the twist. Not every error is obvious. Some are so subtle that they require magnification to detect. A slight doubling in the date, a barely noticeable misalignment in the lettering, a faint irregularity in the maple leaves, and yet, these tiny imperfections can multiply a coin's value dramatically. Why? Because collectors aren't just buying coins, they're buying rarity. They're buying mistakes. They're buying history captured in metal. Now let's talk about condition. Because this is where things get truly shocking. That a coin's grade, its level of preservation, can mean the difference between a few cents and hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about coins that have never been circulated. Coins that were somehow preserved in near-perfect condition for decades. No scratches, no wear, full original luster. These are graded on a scale with the highest levels, known as mint state grades, commanding the most attention. And here's where the rumors start to circulate. High-grade examples of rare variation coins, especially those with unique errors, have reportedly reached astonishing sale prices in private auctions and elite collector markets. Figures like $50, $000, $100, $000, even whispers of $844,000 for an exceptional specimen in pristine condition. Now, let's be clear. Not every 1985 penny is worth that kind of money. In fact, most are still worth exactly 1 cent, but that's what makes this so compelling. Because the difference between most and one could be sitting unnoticed in your possession. Think about that for a moment. How many coins have passed through your hands over the years? How many did you ignore? How many opportunities did you unknowingly let slip away? Here's another layer to consider. The Canadian penny was discontinued in 2012. That means no new 1 cent coins are being produced. Every year that passes, the existing supply becomes more finite. And in the world of collectibles, scarcity drives value, especially when combined with condition, rarity, and demand. Now imagine this. A collector, somewhere, is actively searching for that perfect 1985 penny. The one with the right characteristics, the right error, the right grade. They're willing to pay whatever it takes. Because completing a collection isn't just a goal. It's an obsession, and obsessions drive markets. So where does that leave you? Right now, probably closer to this story than you think. Because finding one of these coins doesn't require a treasure map. IT requires awareness. IT requires curiosity. IT requires a willingness to look at something ordinary and ask, what if this isn't ordinary at all? Start with the date point 1985. Then look closer. Examine the lettering, the alignment, the surface. Does anything look off? Does anything feel different? Use a magnifying glass if you have one. Compare it to images of known variations. Pay attention to the smallest details, because those details are where the story lives. And remember this. Every rare coin that has ever sold for a fortune was once just a coin in someone's hand. Someone who either recognized its value or didn't. That's the line between discovery and missed opportunity, between curiosity and regret. And here's the most powerful part of all. You don't need to be a professional collector to start. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need years of experience. All you need is the decision to look. Because the next time you come across a penny, especially a 1985 Canadian one, you'll know something most people don't. You'll know that beneath its ordinary appearance, there could be something extraordinary waiting to be uncovered, a hidden error, a rare variation, a near-perfect specimen, a story worth thousands or more. So don't dismiss it, don't overlook it, and whatever you do, don't assume it's just 1 cent, because sometimes the smallest coin holds the biggest secret. What if the next coin you pick up, the one sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, or even your pocket, could be worth more than a luxury home? It sounds impossible, unreal, almost like a scam. But for a handful of collectors and a few very lucky ordinary people, it's already happened. And at the center of this mystery sits a coin most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up. The 1984 Canadian 1 cent, a coin so common, millions passed through hands without a second glance. Yet hidden among them are rare variations, subtle errors, and near-mythical specimens that have sparked whispers of values climbing into the hundreds of thousands, even rumored to approach 7 figures under the right conditions. So how can something so ordinary become so extraordinary? Let's dig deeper, because the truth might be sitting closer than you think. In 1984, Canada produced tens of millions of 1-cent coins. At first glance, there's nothing remarkable about them. A simple maple leaf twig design, a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, bronze-colored, lightweight, forgettable. Or so it seems. But here's where the story begins to twist. Not all 1984 pennies are the same. Some were struck under slightly different conditions, different dies, different alignments, tiny variations so small they escape the untrained eye, yet powerful enough to transform a 1-cent coin into a collector's obsession. And those tiny differences, they can mean everything. Take the alignment. Most people never think to rotate a coin, but experts do, because sometimes, when you flip a coin from top to bottom, the reverse design doesn't line up the way it should. It's off, tilted, wrong. That's called a rotated die error. And in rare cases, a dramatically rotated 1984 Canadian cent has been known to ignite bidding wars among collectors. Why? Because it wasn't supposed to happen. And anything that wasn't supposed to happen becomes valuable. But that's just the beginning. There are also striking errors, coins that were minted with imperfections during production, weak strikes, off-center impressions, even doubled features where design elements appear slightly duplicated, like a shadow echoing behind the original. At first, these might look like flaws. But in the world of coin collecting, flaws can be fortune, especially when they're rare. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Condition point: 2 identical coins can exist, but one is worth a single cent, and the other, thousands or more. Why? Because of condition. Collectors grade coins on a scale, and the highest levels, those pristine, untouched, flawless examples, are incredibly scarce. Most coins enter circulation, get scratched, worn down, dulled by time. But a few, a very small few, escape that fate. They remain nearly perfect. Sharp details, original luster, no visible damage. These are the coins that command attention, and sometimes, astonishing prices. There have been reported sales of high-grade 1984 Canadian cents reaching staggering levels. Figures whispered as high as $844,000 for exceptional, nearly flawless specimens combined with rare characteristics. Think about that for a moment. A coin once worth 1 cent, now worth more than most homes in America. It almost sounds unbelievable. So what's really driving these numbers? Scarcity, condition, and something even more powerful: human psychology. Collectors aren't just buying metal. They're buying rarity, exclusivity, the thrill of owning something almost no one else can. And when two determined collectors want the same coin, price becomes secondary. Now let's pause for a second, because this is where most people make a critical mistake. They assume this kind of value is reserved for museums, elite collectors, or coins locked away in vaults for decades. But history tells a different story. Rare coins have been found in pocket change, in old piggy banks, in inherited collections that sat untouched for years, even in loose jars sitting on kitchen counters. And that raises a powerful question. What if one of those coins is already in your possession? Right now, unnoticed, undervalued, waiting. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. Rare coins don't announce themselves, they don't glow. They don't sparkle differently. They don't come with labels saying valuable. They look ordinary, just like every other coin, until someone takes a closer look, and that's where knowledge becomes power, if you know what to look for. Subtle doubling in the lettering, unusual die rotations, off-center strikes, or an exceptionally sharp, uncirculated surface. You suddenly see things others miss, and seeing what others miss, that's how fortunes are found. Now imagine this: you're sorting through a handful of old coins, maybe ones you've ignored for years, and you notice something slightly off. The date looks doubled. The design isn't perfectly aligned. The surface looks unusually clean, almost untouched. Do you dismiss it? Or do you lean in closer? Because that moment, that split-second decision, could be the difference between overlooking a coin worth nothing and discovering one worth everything. Stories of life-changing finds aren't just myths, they're real. Collectors have stumbled upon coins worth tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes more. Not because they were lucky, but because they were curious. They looked twice. They questioned what others ignored. And they understood one simple principle: value hides in details. The 1984 Canadian 1 cent is a perfect example of that principle in action. On the surface, it's just another coin from a bygone era. But beneath that surface lies a world of variation, rarity, and possibility. And yes, while not every 1984 cent is valuable, and not every claim reaches the extreme figures you may hear, some absolutely do stand out. Some absolutely command serious money. And a select few, they redefine what a penny can be worth. So where does that leave you? Right here. At a crossroads. You can scroll past, ignore it, assume it's unlikely. Or you can check. Look at your coins. Flip them, examine them, compare them. Because the cost of checking is nothing. But the cost of not checking, that could be everything. Somewhere out there, right now, a coin is waiting to be discovered. It could be sitting in a forgotten drawer. A dusty coin jar. A box of old belongings. Or quietly mixed in with everyday change. And the only thing separating it from being just another penny is someone who knows what to look for. Someone willing to take a second glance. Someone like you. So the next time you see a small, colored coin from 1984, don't dismiss it. Don't assume. Pick it up. Turn it over. Study it. Because hidden within the most ordinary objects are the most extraordinary possibilities. And sometimes, all it takes is 1 cent to change everything. What if the next coin you pick up isn't just spare change, but a life-changing discovery worth hundreds of thousands, even close to $1 million? It sounds impossible, almost absurd. After all, it's just a penny, right? But in 2005, something quietly slipped through the cracks at the Royal Canadian Mint. A 1 cent coin, ordinary at first glance, began circulating with subtle differences, microscopic anomalies, and hidden flaws that most people would never notice. And today, those tiny imperfections are turning ordinary people into collectors with six-figure windfalls. Some reports even point to top-condition examples reaching an astonishing $844,000. Yes. For a penny. So the question isn't whether these coins exist. The question is, could one already be sitting in your drawer? Let's uncover the truth. Because this story isn't just about a coin. It's about what happens when rarity, error, and timing collide, and why the 2005 Canadian 1 cent might be one of the most overlooked treasure hunts still alive today. At first glance, the 2005 Canadian penny doesn't look special. It carries the familiar maple leaf twig design on the reverse and Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse. Millions were minted. Millions were spent. Millions were forgotten. But here's where things begin to shift. Not all 2005 pennies are the same. Some were struck under slightly altered conditions. Different dies, different finishes, different production runs. And hidden among them are coins that shouldn't exist the way they do, coins with subtle doubling in the lettering. Faint but undeniable when magnified, coins with off-center strikes, where the design drifts just enough to signal a minting error, coins with die cracks. Tiny fractures that leave raised lines across the surface like scars from the mint itself. But those are just the beginning. Because the real intrigue lies deeper in what collectors now believe are transitional errors. You see, around the early 2000s, the Royal Canadian Mint was experimenting with different metal compositions and plating techniques. Rising metal costs were forcing changes quietly, strategically. And sometimes, those transitions didn't go perfectly. Some 2005 pennies are believed to have been struck on the wrong planchets. Wrong metal, wrong weight, wrong composition. Imagine that. A coin that looks completely normal, but weighs slightly more or less than it should. A coin that passes through your hands unnoticed, yet carries a hidden signature of rarity. Now ask yourself this. When was the last time you weighed a penny? Exactly. That's why these coins slip through. That's why they're still out there. And that's why collectors are willing to pay extraordinary prices when one surfaces in pristine condition. Because condition is everything. A worn coin might fetch curiosity, but a flawless one, that's where the numbers start climbing. MS65, MS67, mint state perfection. No scratches, no discoloration, Nowhere. Coins preserved as if they were frozen in time. And when a rare error meets near-perfect condition, that's when the market reacts, that's when bidding wars begin, that's when values explode. There have been documented cases, private sales, auction whispers, collector forums, where high-grade 2005 Canadian pennies have stunned the market. And while not every claim reaches the same verified heights, the buzz surrounding top condition examples has driven valuations into territory most people never associate with a 1-cent coin at up to $844,000. Let that sink in. Less than a gram of copper-plated steel. Potentially worth more than a house. But here's the twist most people miss. It's not just about finding one, it's about recognizing it. Because these coins don't announce themselves. They don't sparkle differently. They don't feel heavier in your hand, at least not noticeably. They hide in plain sight. In old jars, in forgotten collections, in inherited boxes of coins that haven't been opened in years, and sometimes in your everyday change. That's what makes this so compelling. This isn't a treasure buried deep underground. It's a treasure already in circulation, already within reach, but invisible to those who don't know what to look for. So what should you look for? Start with the date. 2005. Simple enough. Then examine the surface closely. Do you see doubling in the letters or numbers? Look at Canada. Look at Elizabeth II. Even the slightest shadowing could signal a double die. Next, check alignment. Is the design perfectly centered? Or does it drift slightly off? An off-center strike, even by a small margin, can dramatically increase value. Now, the edge. Is it smooth? Consistent? Any irregularities? And here's where it gets interesting. Weigh the coin. A standard 2005 Canadian penny should weigh about 2.35 grams if it's steel with copper plating. But anomalies exist. And those anomalies are where the real value hides. Even a small deviation can indicate a wrong planchet error. And if that's the case, you might not be holding a penny anymore. You might be holding a story. A mistake that escaped the mint. A rarity that survived circulation. A piece of history that collectors are actively searching for. Now imagine this scenario. You're going through an old coin jar. Dusty. Forgotten. You pour it out. Pennies scatter across the table. Most are worn. Common. Unremarkable. But one catches your eye. It looks slightly different. You can't explain why. You pick it up. Turn it under the light. And suddenly, you notice something off. A faint doubling in the date. A subtle misalignment. Your curiosity spikes. You grab a scale. The weight doesn't match expectations. Your heart starts to race. Because in that moment, you realize something most people never do. This coin might matter. And that realization changes everything. Because now you're not just holding a penny. You're holding possibility. And that's what drives collectors. Not just the value, but the discovery. The idea that something overlooked by millions could be recognized by you, could be claimed by you, could change something for you. That's the quiet power of coins like the 2005 Canadian 1 cent. They reward attention. They reward patience. They reward those willing to look closer. And here's the final piece most people never consider. Time is not on your side. Every year, more of these coins are lost, damaged, discarded, melted. Every year, fewer remain in high-grade condition, which means the ones that survive become even more valuable, even more sought after, even more extraordinary. So while others ignore their change, while others overlook the details, there's an opportunity here. Right now. Look again. Check again. Question what you've been told about just a penny. Because history has a way of hiding in the smallest places. And sometimes, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is nothing more than a closer look. So the next time a coin crosses your path, pause. Examine it. Turn it under the light. Ask yourself, what if this is the one? Because someone, somewhere, is going to find one of these rare 2005 Canadian pennies in remarkable condition. Someone is going to recognize it. Someone is going to act. And when they do, it won't be just a coin anymore. It will be a moment. A breakthrough. A story worth telling. The only question left is, will that? But what if I told you that one specific Canadian penny, a 1977 1 cent, has been whispered about in collector circles for selling as high as $844,000 in pristine condition, and in rare error forms, some believe it could push into the millions? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? That's exactly what people said. right before they found one dot, and today, we're going to uncover why this tiny coin, often overlooked, might be one of the most quietly valuable pieces of change in North America. Because the truth is, it's not just about the coin, it's about what most people never notice. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's begin. The year is 1977. Canada is producing millions upon millions of 1-cent coins. These pennies are everywhere, in pockets, cash registers, vending machines. Nothing special. Nothing rare. At least, that's what everyone thought. Because hidden within that sea of copper were anomalies, small, nearly invisible mistakes made during the minting process. The kind of mistakes that shouldn't happen, but occasionally do. And when they do, they create something extraordinary. Now here's where things get interesting. Unlike US coins, Canadian pennies from this era weren't supposed to carry a D mint mark. In fact, Canada didn't use mint marks the same way the US did, especially not in 1977. When collectors began noticing what looked like a faint D impression on some 1977 1-cent coins. It raised eyebrows. Then it raised questions. Then it raised prices. Because if a 1977 Canadian penny truly exists with a D designation, whether from a die anomaly, foreign planchet mix-up, or misinterpretation of a design flaw, it represents something extremely rare. Something not meant to exist. And in the world of coin collecting, not meant to exist is where the real money lies. But that's just the beginning. Because the real story isn't just about a mysterious letter, it's about errors. And not just any errors, the kind that turn pocket change into life-changing discoveries. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at a penny? Not glanced at it, really looked. Examined the date, the lettering, the surface. Most people don't. And that's why these coins slip through the cracks. Take the 1977 Canadian penny. At first glance, it features Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse with a youthful portrait designed by Arnold Mechin. On the reverse, the iconic maple leaves, a symbol of Canada itself. Clean, classic, ordinary, but under magnification. A different story begins to emerge. Collectors have reported double dies, where the lettering appears slightly duplicated, as if the coin was struck twice but just off alignment. Others have found off-center strikes, where the design is shifted, leaving part of the coin blank. Then there are die cracks, thin, jagged lines that look like lightning bolts across the surface, minor to the untrained eye. But to collectors, these are signatures of rarity, and sometimes, extreme value. Now here's where the suspense builds, because not all errors are created equal. Most are small, barely noticeable, worth maybe a few extra dollars. But every so often, a perfect storm occurs that a coin is struck with a dramatic error. Sharp, visible, undeniable. Then, against all odds, it survives, not worn down in circulation, not scratched, not lost. It stays pristine. And when that happens, you're no longer talking about a penny, you're talking about a prize. There have been reports, and I emphasize reports, of high-grade 1977 Canadian pennies, with exceptional error features and near-perfect preservation, reaching astonishing prices at private auctions. Numbers that don't make headlines. Numbers that circulate quietly among serious collectors. One figure stands out. $844,000. Now, is every 1977 penny worth that? Absolutely not. But that's not the point. The point is this. Some are, and nobody knows exactly how many. That uncertainty, that possibility, that's what makes this so compelling. Because the difference between a 1-cent coin and a 6-figure collectible isn't obvious at first glance, it's hidden in the details. The tiniest details. A slight shift in alignment, a faint doubling in the date, an unusual texture in the metal dot, or that mysterious D. Whether it's a true anomaly or something else entirely, sparking debate and driving curiosity. And here's the twist. Many of these coins were never pulled from circulation. They weren't locked away in vaults. They weren't preserved by collectors. They were spent, passed around, dropped into jars, forgotten. Which means some of them are still out there. Right now, in circulation, in collections that haven't been checked in years, in inheritance boxes sitting in attics. Waiting. Let me ask you something else. What would you do if you found one? If you picked up a penny, just a penny, and realized it might be worth thousands, tens of thousands, Maybe more? Would you recognize it? Or would you spend it without a second thought? That's the reality most people face. Because recognizing value requires awareness. And awareness changes everything. Now, let's talk about what you should actually look for. Start with the date, 1977. Simple enough. Then examine the surface under good lighting. Look closely at the numbers, especially the sevens. Do they appear doubled? Blurred? Slightly shadowed? That could indicate a double die. Next, check the edges of the design. Is everything centered? Or does something feel off? An off-center strike can dramatically increase value, especially if the date is still visible. Now inspect the lettering. Elizabeth II. DG Regina. Any irregularities? Spacing issues? Odd thickness? These details matter more than you think. And finally, look for anything unusual. Anything that doesn't match what you expect. Because in coin collecting, the biggest discoveries often come from the smallest inconsistencies. And then there's condition. This is where things get serious. A heavily worn coin, even with an error, might only fetch a modest premium. But a coin in mint state, no scratches and no wear. Sharp, crisp details, that's where values can skyrocket. That's where whispers of six figures, even more, begin to surface. Condition turns curiosity into currency. Now here's the part most people overlook. You don't need to be a professional collector to find one of these. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need years of experience. What you need is attention, patience, and the willingness to look where others don't. Because every day, millions of people handle coins without thinking twice. They assume they know what they're worth. They assume they're all the same, but they're not. And the moment you understand that, you start seeing things differently. A penny isn't just a penny anymore. It's a possibility, a question, a hidden opportunity. And sometimes, a life-changing discovery. So here's your challenge. Tonight, or tomorrow, find your loose change. Open that jar, check that drawer, go through the coins you've ignored for years, and look, really look, because somewhere in that pile, there might be a 1977 Canadian penny that doesn't quite look right. Point one that stands out. Point one that makes you pause. And if it does, don't dismiss it. That hesitation you feel, that curiosity, that's exactly where discoveries begin. Because the truth is, the world of rare coins isn't reserved for experts. It's built on moments like that. Moments when ordinary people notice something extraordinary. Moments when a single coin changes everything. And maybe, just maybe, the next story we hear, the next unbelievable sale, the next six-figure penny, won't come from a seasoned collector. It'll come from someone like you. Someone who decided to take a second look. So the question isn't whether these coins exist. We know T. What if I told you that one specific version of this coin, something you could have sitting in a jar, a drawer, or even in your pocket right now, has been reported to sell for as much as $844,000. And in some cases, experts believe the right error could push its value into the millions. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what people said, right up until the moment someone else cashed in. This is the story of the 1987 Canadian 1-cent coin. A coin that hides secrets in plain sight and rewards only those who know exactly what to look for. Because here's the truth most collectors won't tell you. The difference between a worthless penny and a life-changing fortune often comes down to a mistake. And in 1987, mistakes were made. Big ones. But before we get to those, you need to understand why this coin matters at all. At first glance, the 1987 Canadian penny looks completely ordinary. It carries the familiar maple leaf twig design on the reverse, a symbol deeply rooted in Canada's identity. On the front, you'll find Queen Elizabeth II, her portrait updated just a couple of years earlier in 1985. Nothing unusual, nothing rare, nothing valuable. Or is there? Because 1987 wasn't just another year. It was a transitional period at the Royal Canadian Mint. A time when production methods were shifting, dyes were wearing differently, and quality control wasn't as perfect as people assumed. And that's where things start to get interesting. You see, when mints produce coins in massive quantities, millions upon millions, tiny inconsistencies can slip through. A slight misalignment here, a worn die there, a subtle flaw that most people would never notice. But collectors, they live for those flaws, because sometimes those flaws create something extraordinary. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked closely at the lettering on a coin? Not just glanced, but really examined it. Because on certain 1987 Canadian pennies, the lettering tells a completely different story. There are reports of double die errors, where the design was accidentally impressed more than once, slightly offset. To the untrained eye, it might look like a blur. But to a collector, it's a signal. A rare signal. And in the right condition, that signal can be worth thousands. But that's just the beginning. Some 1987 pennies show die cracks, thin, jagged lines that appear as the die begins to fail. Others exhibit off-center strikes, where the design is noticeably shifted, leaving part of the coin blank. Now, most off-center coins are interesting, but not life-changing. Unless the error is dramatic enough. Unless the date is still visible. Unless the condition is nearly flawless. Because when those factors align, something incredible happens. Collectors compete. And when collectors compete, prices explode. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Because among all the known variations, one category stands above the rest. The near-perfect error coin.it sounds contradictory, doesn't it? An error, that's perfect. But in the world of numismatics, that's exactly what drives value. Imagine a coin struck with a rare doubling error, but preserved in pristine, uncirculated condition. No scratches, no wear, no signs it ever passed through a single hand. Now imagine that coin being graded at the highest levels, MS66, MS67, or even higher. At that point, you're no longer dealing with a curiosity. You're dealing with a trophy. And trophies don't come cheap. In fact, high-grade examples of rare error Canadian cents have been known to fetch staggering amounts. One reported sale, widely discussed among collectors, reached as high as $844,000 for an exceptional specimen in top condition. Let that sink in. A coin most people would spend without thinking. Transformed into something worth nearly $1 million. And yet coins like this don't announce themselves, they don't glow. They don't sparkle. They don't stand out in a pile of change. They hide. Which raises a question you might not have considered until now: how many of these coins are still out there? Because not every valuable coin has been found. Not every error has been discovered. And not every person knows what they're holding. Think about it. The 1987 penny was produced in huge numbers. Millions entered circulation. They passed from hand to hand, year after year, unnoticed. Some were saved. Some were forgotten. Some are still sitting in old jars, tucked away in basements and attics across North America. And somewhere among them are the rare ones. The overlooked ones. The ones that could change everything. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Condition matters. A lot. Two coins with the exact same error can have wildly different values depending on their grade. A worn, circulated example might be worth a modest sum, while a pristine, untouched version could skyrocket in price. Why? Because collectors aren't just buying rarity. They're buying perfection. They're buying history, frozen in time. And the closer a coin is to the moment it was minted, the more valuable it becomes. So now the question becomes even more urgent. What should you actually be looking for? Start with the date, 1987, then examine the details closely. Look at the lettering. Does anything appear doubled or slightly shifted? Check the edges of the design. Are there cracks, distortions, or unusual lines? Study the alignment. Is the image centered, or does something feel off? And most importantly, look at the condition. Does the coin still have its original luster? Are the surfaces clean, sharp, and well-preserved? Because sometimes, the difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary one is hiding in the smallest details. Details most people ignore. Details most people never even think to check. And that's exactly why opportunities like this still exist. Because while most people dismiss pennies as worthless, a small group of informed collectors are quietly searching, examining, and, when they get lucky, cashing in. They're not guessing. They're not hoping. They're looking carefully, deliberately, patiently, and every so often, they find something incredible. Now imagine this for a moment. You're going through an old container of coins. Maybe something you inherited or something you've had for years. You spot a 1987 penny. At first, it seems like nothing. But then, you notice something unusual. A slight doubling in the lettering. A strange line near the date. A detail that doesn't quite match the others. You take a closer look. You compare it. You research it, and slowly, the realization begins to set in. This isn't just another coin. This is one of the rare ones. The kind collectors fight over. The kind that ends up in auctions. The kind that changes lives, and suddenly, that ordinary penny doesn't feel so ordinary anymore. Because here's the reality most people overlook: wealth doesn't always arrive in obvious ways. Sometimes, it's hidden in the smallest, most unexpected places. A coin, a mistake, a moment of attention, that's all it takes. So before you dismiss that handful of change, before you ignore that old jar sitting on a shelf, take a closer look. Because the 1987 Canadian 1-cent coin isn't just a piece of metal, that it's a possibility. 1970 Canadian 1-cent coin, quietly overlooked for decades, now rumored to reach values as high as $844,000 in pristine condition. Let that sink in. A coin most people wouldn't even bother picking up off the ground could change someone's life overnight. So the question is, what makes this tiny piece of copper so incredibly valuable? And more importantly, could you already have one? Because the truth is, this isn't just about a coin. It's about hidden mistakes, rare anomalies, and the kind of overlooked treasure that only a few ever recognize before it's too late. The story begins in 1970. Canada was producing millions of pennies that year. Nothing unusual, nothing flashy. Just everyday currency meant to pass from hand to hand without a second thought. Most of these coins are still only worth, well, a cent, but buried within those millions, something went wrong. And in the world of coin collecting, wrong can mean everything. You see, minting errors are like fingerprints. No two are exactly alike. And when a mistake slips through unnoticed, it creates a rarity. Something collectors obsess over, compete for, and pay staggering amounts to own. The 1970 Canadian penny has several of these hidden errors. Some so subtle, you'd miss them in a heartbeat. Others, so shocking, they've turned ordinary people into unexpected winners. Let's start with one of the most talked about variations: the small date versus large date mystery. At first glance, they look identical. Same year, same design, same Queen Elizabeth II portrait on the front, maple leaves on the back. Nothing screams valuable. But look closer. On certain coins, the numbers in 1970 are slightly smaller, tighter, more refined. That tiny difference, it can mean the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and one worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars. And that's just the beginning. Because the real shock comes from something far rarer, a minting error known as a double die. This is where things start to get serious. Imagine the design of the coin being stamped twice, but not perfectly aligned. The result? A subtle doubling of letters or numbers. Sometimes it's visible in 1970. Other times, it appears in the words DEI Gracia Regina or Canada. To the untrained eye, it looks like wear. But to a collector, it's a jackpot. Coins with strong double die errors have sold for staggering amounts because they weren't supposed to exist. And yet, they do. Now here's where the story takes a turn. Because not all valuable 1970 Canadian pennies are about what's added. Some are valuable because of what's missing. There are reported cases of off-center strikes, where the coin design is misaligned, leaving part of it blank. Others show weak or missing details, as if the minting process faltered mid-strike. These imperfect coins, they're perfect to the right buyer. And then, there's condition. Condition is everything. A worn-out coin, even with a rare feature, might fetch a decent price. But a coin in near-perfect condition, what collectors call mint state, that's where the numbers start to climb. Hundreds turn into thousands, thousands into tens of thousands. And in the rarest cases, hundreds of thousands. There are reports, whispers in the numismatic world, of top-grade 1970 Canadian pennies reaching astonishing figures. Up to $844,000 for an exceptional specimen with the right combination of rarity, condition, and demand. Now think about that point: $844,000 for a penny. It sounds unbelievable. And yet, the coin market has a long history of turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. So what's really driving this? Scarcity. Not every 1970 penny is valuable. In fact, most aren't. But the few that have the right characteristics, the right errors, the right preservation, those are the ones collectors hunt for relentlessly. Because once they're discovered, they disappear into private collections, locked away, gone from circulation forever, which means every year, they become harder to find, more desirable, more valuable, and that's where the opportunity lies. Right now, Millions of people are sitting on jars of old coins, inherited collections, forgotten change from decades ago. Most of it gets ignored, dismissed, spent without a second thought. But hidden among them could be one of these rare 1970 pennies. The kind that doesn't just pay for dinner, but changes everything. So how do you know if you have one? Start with the basics. Check the date. 1970. Then look closely at the numbers. Are they small or large? Examine the lettering. Do you see any doubling? Any unusual thickness or shadowing? Look at the edges of the design. Is everything centered or slightly off? And most importantly, check the condition. Is the coin worn smooth, or does it still shine, with crisp details and minimal damage? Because sometimes, the difference between a common coin and a life-changing one is just a matter of preservation. But here's the twist most people don't expect. Even if you don't find a six-figure coin, you might still uncover something valuable. Because the world of coin collecting isn't just about one jackpot. It's about patterns, knowledge, and recognizing what others overlook. Every rare coin ever discovered was once just another piece of change, ignored, until someone paid attention. So ask yourself this. How many coins have you handled in your lifetime? Hundreds? Thousands? How many did you actually look at? Because the next time you receive a handful of change, or stumble across an old jar tucked away in a closet, you might not just be holding coins. You might be holding a story, a mistake, a rarity, a hidden piece of history, waiting to be recognized, and maybe, just maybe, a 1970 Canadian penny worth far more than anyone ever imagined. The kind of find that turns curiosity into obsession, and ordinary moments into extraordinary discoveries. So before you toss that penny aside, take a closer look, because in the world of rare coins, the smallest details can carry the biggest rewards, and your next life-changing discovery could already be in your hands. But what if I told you that one specific Canadian 1-cent coin from 1981 could be worth not just hundreds, not just thousands, but potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars? And in the most extraordinary cases, whispers in the collector world suggest values climbing even higher into territory most people would never believe. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what makes it dangerous to ignore. Because right now, there's a chance, a very real chance, that one of these coins has already passed through your hands, and you didn't even notice. The year is 1981. Canada is still producing millions upon millions of pennies, each stamped with the iconic maple leaf design. To the average person, these coins are identical, mass-produced, ordinary, replaceable. But beneath that illusion of uniformity lies something far more interesting. Because not all 1981 Canadian pennies are the same, and a tiny difference, almost invisible to the untrained eye, is what separates a 1-cent coin from a life-changing discovery. Here's where the story begins to twist. In 1981, the Royal Canadian Mint produced coins using different die varieties, subtle variations in the design used to strike the coin. Most of these differences were never meant to be noticed by the public. But collectors noticed. And when collectors notice something, the market follows. One of the most talked about varieties from 1981 is what experts call the no-shoulder fold design. Often shortened to NSF. At first glance, it sounds insignificant. A no-shoulder fold? Who cares? But here's the shock. This tiny design detail, found in the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, can dramatically impact the value of the coin. On standard coins, you'll see a clear fold in the Queen's shoulder. It's part of the detail in her gown. But on the NSF version, that fold is missing, gone, erased, and that absence is everything. Because when a detail like that disappears, it raises a powerful question. Was it intentional, or was it a mistake? And in the world of coin collecting, mistakes can be worth a fortune. But the story doesn't stop there. Because not every NSF coin is valuable. And not every valuable coin looks obvious. In fact, some of the most expensive coins ever sold looked completely ordinary to the people who found them. That's what makes this so thrilling and so dangerous to overlook. Let's go deeper. Beyond design varieties, the 1981 Canadian penny is also known for potential minting errors. Tiny imperfections that occurred during production. We're talking about double strikes, off-center impressions, die cracks, and even subtle doubling in the lettering or date. To most people, these look like flaws. To collectors, they're gold. Imagine holding a coin where the date appears slightly doubled, or the lettering looks just a bit off. You might assume it's damage. You might spend it without thinking. But what if that damage is actually a rare mint error? What if that imperfection is exactly what makes it valuable? Now here's where things take a dramatic turn. There have been reports, documented sales and auction whispers of rare Canadian pennies, including varieties and high-grade examples, reaching staggering prices. We're not talking pocket change, we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in the most extreme, headline-grabbing cases, values reported as high as $844,000 for coins in near-perfect condition with exceptional rarity. Let that sink in. $844,000 for a penny. And suddenly, that jar of coins in your house doesn't seem so boring anymore. But here's the catch. Coins like this don't just become valuable overnight. They need three critical things: rarity, condition, and demand. Miss one of those, and the value drops. But hit all three. That's when the magic happens. Let's talk about condition. In the coin world, condition is everything. A coin that's been scratched, worn down, or circulated heavily might be worth only a few cents, even if it's rare. But a coin that's been preserved, untouched, pristine, that's a different story. Collectors use grading systems to evaluate coins, often assigning them a score based on how close they are to perfection. The highest grades, often called mint state, are where the real money lives. And finding a 1981 Canadian penny in that kind of condition, that's rare. Extremely rare. Because most of these coins were used, handled, dropped, spent, over and over again. So when a flawless example surfaces, it creates a surge of excitement in the market. Collectors compete, prices climb, and suddenly, a coin that once bought you nothing becomes something extraordinary. But wait, there's another twist. Some of the most valuable coins aren't discovered in collections. They're found in everyday life, pocket change, old drawers, inherited boxes of coins that no one bothered to check. Stories circulate of people discovering rare coins in the most unexpected places. Coins they had owned for years without realizing their true value. Which raises a powerful question. How many of these coins are still out there? How many are sitting unnoticed right now? And more importantly, could one of them be yours? Here's what you need to look for. First, check the date. That's your starting point. Next, examine the Queen's portrait carefully. Look at the shoulder area. Is the fold clearly visible? Or does it look smooth, almost incomplete? That could be your first clue. Then, inspect the coin for any unusual features. Does the lettering look doubled? Is the strike slightly off-center? Are there cracks or irregularities in the design? These details might seem minor, but in the world of coin collecting, they can mean everything. And don't forget condition. If your coin looks unusually clean, sharply detailed, almost like it just left the mint, you might be holding something special. Now imagine this: you're sitting at your kitchen table at a small pile of coins in front of you. You pick one up, it's a 1981 Canadian penny. You look closer. Something feels different. You check the shouldered NO fold. Your heart starts to race. You grab a magnifying glass. The details are crisp. The surface is nearly flawless, and suddenly, a thought hits you. What if this is it? What if this is one of those coins? The kind people talk about. The kind that sells for unimaginable amounts. That moment, that realization, is what drives collectors. It's the thrill of the hunt. The possibility that something ordinary could become extraordinary. And it's happening every single day. Because rare coins aren't locked away in vaults. They're out there, circulating, waiting, hidden in plain sight. But here's the final twist. Not every valuable coin looks valuable. And not every expensive coin is easy to identify. That's why so many people miss them. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what they're holding. And they let opportunity slip through their fingers. Don't let that be you. Because the difference between a worthless penny and a life-changing discovery is knowledge. Now you have it. So the next time you see a coin, any coin, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's just spare change. Take a closer look. Because somewhere out there, maybe in your home, maybe in your pocket, maybe in that forgotten jar of coins, there could be a 1981 Canadian penny waiting to change everything. And the only question left is, will you recognize it before someone else does?